Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and today I'm going to be talking about what your organization can do to not just be safe with all these new generative AI tools like ChatGPT, but also how do you think about looking at the opportunities? How do you prepare, whether you're in a leader? Okay, my video just kind of hopefully you can still hear me. So I'd like to you to share just what is your organization doing today to prepare for the next generation of these AI tools? Again, AI has been around for a very long time. We've been using it in our organizations, but as we have seen over the past few months, the rise of ChatGPT in particular has really exploded in its use. And I ask people in my audiences and in executive workshops, and I do know how many people have used ChatGPT. And it's easily about 80% of the audience is raising their hands. And then when I ask how many people are actively using it on a at least a weekly basis, it's still about a quarter of the people are still using it. So it is significant. And in fact, some of the research coming out of enterprise technology research team found that 41% of companies are evaluating OpenAI technologies and or plan to use it. And so just for comparison, and having looked at the adoption of enterprise technology tools, this is extremely high. Usually, things like cloud or agile or some of these other technologies and processes are typically in the high 30s. And we have this brand new technology, generative AI, especially open AI specifically, that is really new, just announced in late November. And already 41% of companies are evaluating it. 12% plan to use OpenAI, and 44% had no plans to check it out. So, granted, it is still really, really early. The tools are fairly primitive compared to what I think are going to be developed. But you can see from the enthusiasm and also by the trials and experimentations that people are doing that this is really, really very interesting to a lot of companies and for good reason. We can save a lot of time. I'll go through and talk about some of those things. But the three things I want to talk about today are first of all, how do you look for opportunities and prioritize them? Second of all, how do you prepare your people? And the third of all, what are the processes, policies, procedures, the three Ps that are needed to make sure that you're protecting the interests and the data of your company and also of your customers? So let's go through this. And again, I encourage you to share just what are some of the things that you're doing to prepare. And I would be very interested in talking to you and following up with you also to do some interviews on some research that I'm doing into the space. What are people actually doing? How are you thinking about this across these three dimensions of looking for opportunities, thinking about how it's going to impact your organizational operating model, your workforce strategy? And then third of all, what are the policies in place you're putting in place to be safe? So let's talk about the opportunities. First of all, it's obvious that there's a huge impact, especially on things that you're trying to do on a what we call it clerical aspects of things, where you're doing first drafts, for example, of marketing, of coding, of legal, financial reviews. All of these things that were tedious, required a lot of consolidating information, pattern recognition, are huge opportunities for either cost savings or to identify growth opportunities. Again, that's all strategic advantage gives you is you either can reduce your costs and time to market, or you can actually think about ways to grow into new markets and create an advantage that no one else has. Better products, better quality that command a price premium. So, just give you an example. I came across an example of a company in February 2021. Again, this is a little bit while ago, called In Silico Medicine. And they announced that they had an AI generated new drug that moved from concept when they filed the patent to phase one clinical trials in less than 30 months and for about $2.6 million. And if you're in the pharma space, you realize that's significantly faster and cheaper than most drug discovery. So that using AI to develop these new drugs and to do the testing around it is is a huge advantage. And generative AI takes that to another level across different areas. So, faster time to market, reduced cost savings, potentially improved quality too, as well, because you're not going to have as many errors potentially. You can do error checking. All of these different things makes us, frankly, table stakes. So being able to just get these cost savings are table stakes, I believe, to be competitive in the marketplace. And because everyone will have access to these tools. Your ability to generate copy faster, to look at legal documents faster, isn't going to be significantly better than anybody else's because we're all using the same models. Uh, but I think again, the real opportunities are these little golden nuggets. Where can you really use these tools to give you a competitive advantage over anybody else? Because you can identify opportunities, you can understand your customers better, and you can reduce your time to market. So, two ways to think about this: the table stakes aspects of how you're going to change your operations to do the most basic heavy lifting that we already know generative AI is really good. Again, I call it first draft content creation or coding creation. And then, second of all, where are the places inside of your business that can really use some of these tools to create that competitive advantage? So, one of the things to do is to really just go around and talk to your IT department and find out who's using ChatGPT, or Midjourney, or some of these other AI tools, and find out where are these tools being used in your organization. Because people are very creative, they're using these tools to already change the work that they're doing, either again to reduce the costs and the time it takes to do things, or they're finding new opportunities. Use that as a starting point to identify on a strategic basis where you could be investing in these tools. I think, again, this is not necessarily something that is going to impact organizations in terms of the opportunity seeking right away. But the sooner you get started to understand how you can use these tools for your business, for your organization, the sooner you'll be able to see those cost savings and be able to tap into those opportunities. So that's the first thing, is to really understand the impact in the short term and also the long term of these new tools. The second thing is to start preparing your people. There is no doubt that these jobs, the roles that people have in every single organization, is going to be impacted. There's a lot of data that has been out there and done. I'll be sharing that in a future live stream that talks about more of the human aspects of where you can expect these changes to happen. And so I think as a leader, it's especially for an organization going through these kinds of disruptions, you need to be thinking about what that impact is and getting ahead of that. For example, redefining what the job descriptions look like. For example, if you're doing marketing, if you're doing legal reviews, if you're doing coding, even, how are you going to use these tools to create those first drafts to be more efficient in your time? But then you can then use more of your time and that effort to refine the content, to refine the coding, to do quality checks, to identify new solutions. So you're using these generative AI tools to do the heavy lifting, and then therefore you can use more of the creativity to do this. And this is going to become extremely important because more and more of these tools will be built into the tools that we use every day. Microsoft, if you haven't seen it, take a look at the videos that demonstrate its new Copilot that will be embedded into all the Office tools: Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You'll have these tools at your literally at your fingertips to generate content for you in those first drafts. So, understanding how this is going to impact roles and start redefining, working with people, working with HR, in terms of defining what these roles, what they look like, setting the expectations for people. And that's the second thing, is to have these conversations right now with people to say, well, I can see this is going to impact my job. Are we going to need fewer copywriters, fewer administrative assistants, fewer coders in the future? What's that going to mean for me? And so to have a workforce strategy around these categories is a really smart thing to do as an organization now. You might be one of those people. You might be managing them. You could be the CEO of the organization. And to get ahead of this, we assure people that as we're using these tools, we're also thinking about the implications on the human side and the workforce side. And then finally, I would encourage you to think about, does your organization have the right people to be able to manage this? In the same ways that these tools will probably eliminate some of the tasks and the roles and maybe even the jobs that exist today, I do believe it's going to create new jobs. For example, people who can work with these large language models, work with these AI tools, who know how to use them, who have training and developed the skills to be able to use them in more creative ways. Maybe even developing these tools inside the organization. And I'll talk about that in the next section. Because you need to have these tools in house to develop that competitive advantage again. So it's important to say, do we have the right people? How are we going to develop these skills? Because frankly, these people don't exist anywhere right now. These tools are so new. So are we going to grow that capability in house? Are we going to hire people from outside so they can grow into those roles now? And then also think about how our operating model needs to be much more agile to be able to scale all of these tools. The more and more I think about it, if you aren't already operating in some sort of capacity with agile operating models, this is going to require that you start doing that because it's changing so quickly that if you have an agile operating model, you're much more likely to be able to incorporate these new jobs and these roles than if you're in a static model. And if your operating model is already agile, we know that one of the biggest challenges of agile is being able to scale it. And again, there's some interesting experiments happening right now that look at how these new generative AI models allow you to be able to scale. So those are the first two things. So I just want to take a little break because we've talked about, first of all, how to identify opportunities. And then, second of all, how you can think about your workforce model, your people model, operating model in this new future. I have to think about it strategically. So I have a couple examples here. So we have from Lisa. Hi, Lisa. Great to see you. This is how she's using it now. I treat GPT as an assistant, travel plans, list generation, definitions and distinctions, resource suggestions, and summarizing longer text. You're using it a lot, Lisa. We've had these conversations, Lisa and I, in a small group talking about these tools. But this is a really interesting point Lisa brings up. My biggest concern during this preparation stage is creating my own guardrails and remaining committed to fact checking. Excellent point, Lisa. It's so easy to be lulled into the beautiful language that GPT puts in. Like, okay, that sounds great, but is it right? Is it correct? Is the quality there? The most dangerous thing you can do is to generate some text, copy it, and send it off and use it. So Lisa making a great point that quality becomes a really key issue. Um, Jay Bryant here says, we're starting to look at the AI tools for help with writing and creating informational videos. That's fantastic. Jay, I would love to learn more about how you're using this. So let's talk by email. I know where to find you. But it would be great to find out, get a little more details about how you're actually doing that. Let's see. We have another, I'm sorry, here, this is a comment from Jay. Jay Johnson, the elephant in the room is the redefinition of intellectual property and proprietary information. And we have Lisa coming in, chiming in. I'm a LinkedIn Learning and EBSCO faculty member and author. I'm reticent to copy paste my book and chapters into the engines. And Lisa, you have an absolute right and worthy concern to be cautious about inserting proprietary information into the ChatGPT engines. So yes, and Jay's also chiming in, absolutely agreed on the IP issue. So that is a great segue into the last section of how to think about it. So we've talked about opportunity seeking, we've talked about the people and the workforce implications. And the third area is really the policies, the procedures, the processes to protect. I love all my P's. So first of all, I think one of the biggest things to understand is that when you insert your information into ChatGPT, anything you type into it is going to be incorporated into the data model and could potentially be used. And so they just came out with some provisions that now you can go in and actually check off and say, I don't want my information to be used in training the model. I want it to be kept out of it. But the safest and best way to do this, and frankly, if you are in the UK, the EU, or in California, there are privacy protection laws that require that if you're going to use data, and especially any sort of proprietary customer data, that you have to have a contract in place with the vendor to make sure that it's very clear how the data is going to be used, who's using it. And ChatGPT, the web interface, is not sufficient. So, as an organization, it's really good to set in place the open API with OpenAI. So, the API with OpenAI to be able to use your own version of ChatGPT. So, this allows you to use the entire engine of ChatGPT, but all of your data stays segmented and separate, and you have a contract in place that dictates how that data can be and will be used or not used. So that's a base model of getting a licensed version, an API of the ChatGPT, and then making sure that people inside the organization are trained and are using that version of ChatGPT. Now, this does two things. First of all, and it gives you the ability to know who's using it and how they're using it, because now you have your own private instance. The second thing is to get access to the ChatGPT, you have to go through a little bit of training, and then you can decide what people need to be trained on. So this is not about cutting off all access to ChatGPT. It's saying if you're going to use it, you're going to get redirected to this private version. And if you don't have permission and are authorized to use it, then you have to take this really light training so that you're aware of what to share into it and what not to share into it. And more importantly, what to do with the stuff that comes out of it. To Lisa's point, knowing it's one thing to generate and ask the right questions, it's another thing to do the quality checking, to be aware of these hallucinations that it's prone to, and to take it with a big grain of salt of what you can and cannot do with this information. So I think one of the things that's so important to understand here is that the intellectual property, this information that you own, is and the customer data that you have is a very, very precious resource. And how you use it and where you use it, when you use it, is a key part of this whole AI space. So one other couple of things. I've been working with our privacy and security team at PA Consulting, and we have been working with companies and governments all over the world for years. And one of the things they brought up for me was that if you're using customer data to develop these algorithms, be really clear and understand if you have the right to do that. A great example is Weight Watchers. They had launched a children's weight loss tool, an app, but they were collecting data about children and using it to develop the algorithm without the right permissions. And so it was challenged in court, and they had to take that entire data set, destroy the algorithm because they had no rights to it. They had to destroy the whole thing and also pay a fine. So be really clear as you're developing these algorithms, as you're pursuing these opportunities, make sure that your data strategy, that your data privacy and use rules are absolutely clear. And in particular, make sure that your development teams understand the risks that they take on. Make sure they have the training to understand the data and what they can and cannot use. And it's not just your development teams anymore. It's anybody using these tools that have access and using it for any sort of information. So think about your marketing team. Do they have the right to use that customer data and behavior to develop these algorithms? Because if you don't, you're making decisions based on this. You may have to be, in the future, you may have to destroy all that algorithm, all that investment that you've made. So make sure that your data sources are not poisoning the model that you're creating. So, not to completely scare you on this, but it's one of those things where a little bit of upfront work and thinking is going to be super helpful in making sure it's happening correctly. And then finally, to Lisa's point about accuracy and quality of the use of the data. One of the things we want to make sure, again, this is the ethical and responsible use of AI. Just because you can create these answers and these insights doesn't mean that you should be using them, because there may be bias built into the model. that is steering you to make decisions that may or may not be the right one. So, for example, if you are, we know from a lot of examples that when crime, police departments and crime units, investigative units, are using some of these predictive models, they may sometimes be biased against certain populations and making poor decisions. And so, how do we know? How can we be sure that the data and the information is being delivered without the bias, that the quality is there to the levels that we want? That's the responsible and ethical practice of AI. And we need to have oversight, very light oversight potentially right now to not stymie the work, but oversight across the use of AI in your organization to make sure that the policies are in place. That if we don't have policies, then we start writing them. These guardrails are in place so that people know where they can go and not go outside of them. So that's a key thing that I think is so important to have. So let's see. I have a bunch of other comments here. We have Mark saying, commenting again to Jay's point about intellectual property. It's going to be messy. Agreed, Mark. Absolutely. Some startups will push the limits while others must follow them. It's interesting. My worry here is less about the big companies. I worry about the big companies doing something different. I worry about the two, three, 400 generative AI and various AI startups that are doing things now. There's very little oversight about them, how data is collected. They're already launching products without a first round of funding, so they don't have the investor oversight. And it's tempting to go and try a lot of them because they're really, really powerful. I look at Jasper.ai that helps with copywriting. And again, I think they're doing it very, very well. And they are doing some amazing work. And in many ways, they may be displaced because of some of the tools that are coming out from Microsoft in the future. But we also see my biggest concern about the big companies is that we're in a big um, uh, battle right now, competitive battle. It reminds me of the search engine wars way back in the early mid 1990s. And when you had Excite and Google and Yahoo and Microsoft, we now have Microsoft and Google and some other players really battling it out. And the competitive aspect of this, I think, is going to mean that sometimes these safeguards may not always be there. So we have to be really careful. I think everyone's very aware of this, but I also worry about the small players doing some things that may be taking on more risk than we can afford right now. So the question is, what products and tools help us set up a private AI space? The easiest one is to go to OpenAI at openai.com and go into the developer section and get an Open API key. And that allows you to open a private instance of of ChatGPT. So that's probably the easiest way to do that. It takes a little bit of programming to do it, but I guarantee you it's the easiest way to do it. I'm in the process of using some of these tools to build my own proprietary ChatGPT that takes all of my content, my book content, my videos, the speeches, the Q&A, all of my content, and can query that because frankly, I can't remember everything that I've produced over the past couple of decades. And I'm hoping to use it to just draw insights, connect the dots, help me remember the case studies, but also make it public so that people can ask, quote, me questions. And I can see what those questions are to help me inform my research and work. So these are some of the tools that I think are easily available now that we can build. And it's still really primitive. It's still really early to be able to do this. But I'll get some more details step by step, and I'll try posting that up in my Friday version of this LinkedIn live stream. I'll put it on my LinkedIn article, a step by step on how to set up these private GPTs. Let's see. Mariam has a great question here. Point here. ChatGPT has been known to generate outputs that are influenced by social biases. Absolutely. Companies need to evaluate how these issues may affect current product or service offerings before embedding ChatGPT. So, Miriam, great point to make. It's great to be able to just use these tools and take them at face value. But to your point, before you make them a key part of your offering, or more importantly, use ChatGPT to develop the offerings, then be sure and take a really strong look at what potential biases are already built in. We know that these are the AI models tend to be biased and privilege certain groups than others. And so we need to be really careful about taking the outputs and using other data sources to verify, to gain confidence, and for, frankly, these models to have credibility with us over time. One of the beautiful things about the private version of GPT is this area that this one slider. Um, and I keep forgetting the name. I want to say it's called understanding or knowledge. I can't remember the name of it. But right, you can go from 0 to 1. 0 being it's going to be much more sure about and very careful about its responses. And so for things that require tasks that require tremendous precision, and if you run the same request over and over again, it's going to give you the same request versus being more creative. If you put the slider over to 1, and there you can be much more creative. So you can generate the response again, and it's going to come up with different things until you get one that you like. So depending on how you're using the tool, you may want to put that slider closer to 0 to be more specific, or 1 to be more creative. So there are ways to control that inside of the private instance of ChatGPT if you want to use that. So is the developer page platform.openai.com? I believe it is. But I will verify that for you, Lisa. Again, I just click on developer under openai.com, and I usually can just get through it that way. I unfortunately don't pay attention to the URLs as much as I should be. So that's what I have for today. I again, I'll be here next week. I do not have my act together yet to know exactly what I'm going to be talking about next week, but I suspect it's going to be just given the interest on the development of these private AI tools and how to do them in a safe way. I'm also trying to get an expert from my organization to come and talk more about these privacy models and the implications for the organization, which is grappling with calendars a little bit right now. So fortunately, I don't know exactly what is going to be a topic for next week, but I will be here next Tuesday, the usual time slot, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 o'clock Eastern, to talk about something around privacy and having your own GPT, private GPT. Again, I think it's a fascinating space and one of the most disruptive things I've seen come onto the market and to the scene in a very long time. And so I don't want to be so much of a cheerleader and build this hype cycle. I want to make sure that we are approaching this in a thoughtful, rational way, but in a way that also allows us as organizations, as leaders, to create these disruptive new tools to help our customers and hopefully our communities and societies too. So take care. Stay safe out there with these tools. Have fun. Again, as always, I would love to hear in great detail what you are doing in this space, what the challenges you have. It really informs my work and research. So please stay in touch. Take care. Bye bye.